Yes, well, welcome to what I consider a vitally important aspect of our spiritual progress and our spiritual journey. The two things which a lot of people haven't perhaps thought were connected, and that is our light bodies and the light language. And in fact, as we go through today, I will show you how they are linked, and also give you a bit of an experience of both, so that if it's something you're not familiar with, you get a feel for it, shall we say. I'd also will like to explain away some of the misunderstandings, in other words, the ideas that have grown up, like popular myths tend to do, around some of the subjects. It's a human trait. We tend to, if we don't understand something, we tend to create something that makes sense to us, and that's of course the basis of the myths in all the languages. And the reason I shall bring that in is because in this field of spiritual progress and work, to have some mistaken ideas can, worst case scenario, deflect us from our path, slow our progress, and so forth. So I'll share those with you as to my understanding, and where I get my understandings from too, because I think that's important. So to start off with, I did put in the title that there are actually 3 light bodies, and a lot of people aren't actually aware of this. We use the term quite loosely, light body, and without the realization that if you go into it in any depth, you'll find that there actually are 3. Now, the 2 higher ones are on the 5th and 6th dimensions and beyond. So in that sense, they are pre-existent. In other words, they were emanated from the Godhead long before we decided to participate in what is often called this experiment of living lifetimes on this planet Earth in the 3rd dimension. And so as such, fortunately, we cannot affect them in any way, and what we do here on the 3rd dimension has no bearing on their perfect divinity, shall we say. So the highest of them that we can be aware of is termed the Christed Overself, or the Christ body of light. And it is understood, if you're a little familiar with some of the scriptures, that Jesus became Christed, and as I understand it, it was the transfiguration where he started this process of moving into the 3 light bodies, and eventually finished up as the Christ, the Christed being. So the Christed Overself is of a much higher frequency, connections to much higher levels of source levels, shall we say. So it's something we don't need to be concerned with, because obviously we've got still plenty of work to do down here on our other light, our lower light bodies and our soul journey. Otherwise we still wouldn't be here, of course. So the second is the I am and Overself, or the God Self, or Higher Self. And if you've listened to any of my previous programs, you'll have heard me use these terms interchangeably. And I spent the first program that I did in this series just purely explaining the understandings that I have around this I am presence or higher self. So you might like to check back on that if it's something that you're not too familiar or a bit rusty on. Now, this one is again 5th dimensional, and so we can't really understand what the 5th dimension is or anything higher, because we can only understand from the level that we are at. In other words, the 360-degree view that we have around the 3rd dimension. The analogy, you could say, is like a goldfish in a bowl that is within its own environment, and that's all it knows. And yet it sits within a much vaster environment of a higher frequency, but it is completely unaware of it. And so that's a little bit similar to our living here in the third dimension. We do go in and out of fourth dimension in deep meditations and things like that. But the fifth dimension is something we can't really understand or access as yet, because that's what we're going to hopefully ascend into. However, we are aware of some of its possibilities, its potential, shall we say, and that is what the whole spiritual journey is about, is living up to the highest spiritual potential that we possibly can. In other words, being the best expression of your higher self while you're still in this physical 3D form. So all the highest qualities that have been taught throughout the ages by the masters and the avatars, and through all the good spiritual traditions and paths, will give you these hints. And I talked about those in the part 2 of my ascension journey, that these are principles that we all aspire to and will accomplish at some point. So these, in their ultimate, once we've completed them, of course, will take us into this fifth dimensional state. So we needn't concern ourselves there, but we have our work to do here. And as I explained, I think in the second of my series, the way the higher self, or the I Am Presence, is connected to us is through our soul and our heart-soul center. In fact, it is the animating principle, shall we say. It is the source of our life force. And that has been reduced now to a trickle or a silver cord over many, many lifetimes of very dense experience in the third dimension. And so that is also registered, the reflection of this higher self potential, our divine counterpart, as the divine spark in the soul, that it's called. And it's up to us to work on this divine spark so that we expand the light of the soul, and eventually it will consume and transform and transmute our whole being and our whole consciousness. So that's what this whole spiritual journey, by whatever name you wish to give it, is all about. So we do have that link, and we can actually connect with it in communication and knowledge and inspiration. It's the source of all of that. And again, I talked about that, about the Holy Spirit being that connecting link, that hotline, as it were, to our higher self. So do listen to my previous programs if you haven't already done so. And the reason that this is so important is to have this understanding, and by calling it the I Am Presence, we know exactly where it came from, because the Godhead, the source as it were, is known as Aya Asha Aya, which is I am that I am. And it is from that Godhead that all the I Am Presences of every person, every soul that is incarnated here, emanated. And so we know that that is our actual source level. And it's also being reinforced, if you know anything of the Bible, the scriptures. I'm not a Bible scholar, but I do know some of the important parts, shall we say. And you'll notice that many of the most profound statements that Jesus made started off by saying, I am. Because obviously he knew of this higher divine presence that we all have, which is an emanation of our high self and thence to the Godhead. And of course what's happened in, as tends to happen in religions and interpretations, the I am became mistaken for the messenger, for the personality of Jesus, where in fact, if you read it carefully, you'll see that he was really referring to this divinity, this divine potential that we have, rather than he himself as a person. So, unfortunately, a lot of paths became fixated on the messenger instead of the message that was being brought. So one of his most profound statements, to my mind, is saying, I am, and I'm going to add the words is, the in between, I am is the way, the truth, and the life. Because truly, once we work with this higher connection through our soul and higher self and the Holy Spirit, the communicator, when we aspire to this divine potential, this is the only way we will spiritually progress. And it is the truth of our being, as I have just mentioned, as what is recorded in the scriptures. And therefore it gives us the life eternal, the life immortal. And while we're doing it, and still here in the third dimension, it also gives us a vastly enhanced life experience. We can begin creating heaven on earth. And to me, that's one of the delights of being on the spiritual path, because we've got a greater vision and a greater understanding. So that's just a little recap, shall we say, of the I am higher self. Now, the third body of light is known as the inner body of light, and Dr. Hurtak in his Keys of Enoch calls it the Gematria body of light, meaning that the Gematria is the link through the divine language, God's language, and its vibrational frequency, which is the way that we can, one of the main ways that we can progress spiritually, but also start restoring and activating this inner body of light. So I will call it by that term because it is explanatory in that sense. And this inner body of light we can do something about. This is the one that we can restore and reactivate. It is a potential reflection, because it isn't there until we start becoming conscious and doing something about it. It is a potential reflection of our I am higher self, and it is actually necessary to start working to activate it, shall we say, so that our connection to our higher self becomes clearer and more powerful. We can then receive more power to use from the heart soul center for the good of all and for our own progress and for our own service, the more we activate this inner light. So it's the light within us, shall we say, and it's well known that people who get drawn to are the ones that have this sort of inner light, this inner warmth that radiates from them. And in the old drawings of old, you'll see that holy people and saints and so on were always drawn with a light around them to represent the fact that this light was glowing so strongly from within that it created this beautiful energy field and, of course, the halo around the head. So this is the third body of light, the one that we really can focus on. What else does it do? Well, of course, it raises your vibrational frequency, and the higher your frequency, then the greater potential we have for expanding your consciousness to your higher consciousness. Also, it creates a protective field, if you will. I prefer not to use the word protection because it could be misinterpreted that there's things out there to fear. And as we know, fear attracts, so we don't take it from that view. But we certainly do need what I call fortification from within, because we are subject to all sorts of energies in this 3D, positive and negative, and the mass consciousness and the energies and entities, the thought forms of the quantum field and so forth. And so by really strengthening this inner light body, we are able to deflect these much more effectively from our everyday life. It is also part, I have discovered in my journeying and experimenting with the concepts as I understand them, to make sure that I have understood them correctly. I always test drive. It also enables us to create the space so that more miracles, that I call miracles, can occur in our lives. And these are just magical, because miracles in the generic sense means that it's beyond the normal realms of expectation and the way things normally would work out. So this again is part of our exciting journey and potential if we choose to work with it. So how do we activate this inner body, this Gematria body of light? Okay. One of the processes of it is working to restore the axiotonal lines. Now, that's talked about in the Keys of Enoch, Key 317, I think was the first mention of it, to explain the dormant grids, if you like, that we have already within us as a sort of a potential structure. And the axiotonal lines extend from the acupuncture lines that we are aware of as energy lines in Eastern medicine. And how I visualize it, because it seems to be easier to work on if we've got a picture in our head, is just as we know when we see a neon sign above a business or a shop, when the power is off, you can see the dark neon tubes, and they're not lit up, but they're there waiting. And as soon as the power switch is switched on, they light up, and you can see this amazing array of coloured lights. And so in a sense, I like to visualize it, because there is a sacred geometry to these grids, these axiotonal lines, throughout the body. They have certain nexus points and so forth. And so understanding them like that as a grid, what we're working on is to turn the power on. In other words, to increase the flow of power, of love, light, energy from your higher self. Self-mastery is another thing that will self-activate this inner body of light. And that means mastering our mental, our emotional, and our physical selves. And as we know, that's the biggest challenges that we have living in a body, because otherwise our thoughts can run away with us and dominate us, or our emotions can overwhelm us, or our physical desires and needs and cravings and so forth can take over. So those are very basic forms, obviously, but to be aware that self-mastery is part of the spiritual journey. It's part of the curriculum, if you like, on Schoolhouse Earth. And as I've mentioned before, if we are working to graduate, then we need to complete the curriculum. The other thing that greatly enhances the restoration and the activation of the inner light body is using God's language of light, because that is the highest frequency, the vibrational frequency that we have to use, while also being, of course, in the state of love, which is the highest emotional state that we can be in, the highest frequency emotional state. I'll come back to God's language of light in a few moments as it's part of this whole talk, and explain how to use it and how it affects us and how it's linked together, because it is one of the most powerful tools that we actually have available. But first, I thought I'd just like to take you on a little journey to experience perhaps a sense of what this inner light body might be like, might look like to you, might feel like within you, because then you've got something in your consciousness to work towards. So if you'd like to join me in this little experience, I just suggest you close your eyes and just go within your body, and become first of all aware just of your physical body, your hearing, your thinking. At the moment you're identifying yourself with your flesh and blood, and no doubt imperfections too. Now go deeper into the trillions of cells that each one of us has, right down to the DNA. This is where the programming, the information is coded. It makes the body alive. And fortunately, as we now know through modern science and epigenetics, it does define you, but it is changeable, it is alterable, it is not set. And so it carries information also for all the body functions. So if we want to improve or heal from within, this is part of the process. And now remember, and this is something I did explain in a previous talk, that encrypted within the DNA is the divine code. And this is the prototype, shall we say, emanated from your higher self, of your perfect form. And then from that original blueprint was created through our karmic issues of past lives and what we're here to do in this life, and all the experiences we've had in this life, changes that code and makes it less than whole and perfect. But it is encrypted by our higher self, and so we can work to restore that perfect God code that was eternally existing before each of our incarnations. And this is one of the ways I have worked on for myself for self-healing. So in a sense, know now that every cell within you contains a holograph of your divine perfection. From head to toe, you are filled with this divine blueprint, which can be restored and reactivated. So, just take a few deep, calming breaths. And now sense above your head the energy of your pre-existence I am light body. Breathe now, breathe it down, breathe its energy, its love light down into your heart soul center. Bring this life consciousness now into that flame within your heart. And remember, this flame actually has three aspects: divine love, divine wisdom, and divine power. It is sometimes called the threefold flame within the heart. Now, because your I am higher self is divine perfection, each breath intend to bring more of that power now pouring down into this heart soul center, to pump more love light energy into your DNA, into your neurons in your brain, and through your whole body network. And we're going to just use the universal mantra of Aum to help the vibratory energy field that we're creating within us now. Aum has three aspects to it as well. One is creation, creating that which we are choosing now to embody. Maintaining is the second aspect. And then the third aspect is destruction, meaning letting go that which is imperfect, that which doesn't serve us. So you might like to join with me in 3 Aums, bringing that energy, feeling it coming right within and coming from your heart soul center and then pumping out throughout your whole body into every cell. Aum. 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 And now sense this pilot light, this spark within your soul, beginning to expand now into a brilliant flame of divine love light. Now begin to feel within your body the vibratory frequency increasing. And as you look or imagine within this divine spark, you'll see it's expanding. The pilot light is becoming a beautiful flame. And the more you breathe into it with this intention, this flame now is generated right throughout your body and takes on a body form, filling your whole being as an inner light body. Feel it going throughout all the meridians, all the grids in your body, all the neural pathways, the networks in your brain, the whole, every system within your body is being filled now with a higher vibratory frequency of love light power. Now, with your intention, focusing it down, right down to the DNA again, and have the intention, if you choose, to make contact with your original perfect DNA blueprint, this God code. And the more power you can bring into this from your higher self, which knows only perfection and divine light, so the more this original perfection can be restored. And now see it within your body, this whole body form of light, the Gematria body of light, growing stronger and brighter. And the more you do this, of course, the stronger it will become, and the more it will even emanate beyond your physical 3D form. And now if you've got any area in your body that is less than comfortable, maybe you have a bit of pain or discomfort somewhere, just for a moment or two in this state, focus over that area and focus to breathing more love, light, power from your higher self into that area. And this helps the transmutation of the imperfection and the cause, and giving it the energy of love and light. And this will help to self-heal. Now you might like to open your eyes, and you'll probably notice that you're feeling quite alive and vibrant from within if you've been able to join me. If not, go through it again, and now you know what to expect, and you'll find that you will actually sense the benefit of this. So, now let's move on to the other connection, which is language of light, or light language. And there is a statement which says, if you wish to speak with God, you've got to know God's language. Which sort of makes sense from our 3D understanding. The term language of light, or light language, you can find in some of the very ancient scrolls, but it became more well known through Dr. Hurtak's Keys of Enoch, where he talks a lot about the light language and the language of light. And he explains it very clearly there, and on some of his DVDs and CDs as well, which I'll mention later. And this divine language of light is made up of the sacred codes, or energy light packets, shall we say, of God's creation. And the ancient text of the Sefer Yetzirah described how Abraham understood that these light packets of immense power and energy were used to create the universes and the world and us. Now, they're really symbols. We call them an alphabet, but it's not a true alphabet. They're symbols. And as we know in our 3D, in science, when you want to indicate a vast field of information, you just use a symbol. So for example, as I've mentioned before, H stands for hydrogen with all its properties and qualities. O stands for oxygen, and when you combine them, H2O, you create another formula, another result, which is water. And so similarly, this flame alphabet is how we can record and work with this divine language, because it too represents all the creative energy of divine creation. And so using some of these formula, shall we call them, rather than just names, activates some of these some of this immense creative power. And it's, when we see it written, it's using a flame alphabet in its earliest Hebrew Aramaic form. And I did show this in a previous one, but for those who didn't see it, I'll just show this picture again. I think that's in the right place. And it simply is a depiction of the source of creation, which is light. Science agrees with that too, the same as the spiritual understanding. The first thing that was created was light. And then from that emanates this flame. It has a name, it's called a yod. But it represents the basic flame or the fire of creation, which in the Eastern scriptures is how it's termed. And so this flame symbol is the basis of every one of the 22 symbols of the original flame alphabet, because every symbol had this original God light, this divine light. So, the name which is given for us to understand and has one of the most powerful vibrations when you use it with knowledge and intent is the name of God of Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh, sometimes shortened to Yahweh. And in one set of ancient scrolls known as the Pistis Sophia, which I have here, these were the advanced teachings of Jesus to his disciples when he came back in his resurrected form after his ascension to teach them and give them higher understanding so that they could go and carry on the work. And he actually puts it this way, that the name with a capital N, meaning the name of our Creator God, Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh, that is higher than all of these, because he's been talking about other names there, the name in which exists all names, all lights, and all powers. So in other words, all the divine light and power is encapsulated in that name. So it's a very powerful name. I have mentioned it, of course, a lot previously. And just to recap, it also relates, the 4 symbols in it relate exactly to the 4 basic building blocks of creation of this world and of us, the 4 elements of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and carbon. And the way they're related is through their numerical value of the flame alphabet symbols, which exactly match the atomic weight mass from the periodic table of elements of those 4. Now, the chances of that happening by chance, by accident shall we say, has been calculated to be 0.00042. So to me that doesn't mean that it was accidental. It was definitely encoded there through these elements. And it's also coded within our 4 nucleotide bases that are the beginning of our DNA function of U, C, A and G. It's a huge subject which I do have more information on. If anyone wishes to access it, they just need to contact me. So these light packets are just available to us through sound and through visual, like an optical mantra, and they have amazing uplifting effect. And so this language of light, this God's language, is one of the most powerful, potent tools that we can use for everything, and certainly for activating our inner light body. Now I'll just cover 1 or 2 myth understandings that have built up around it. This divine God's language of light obviously isn't channeled, which is a contradiction in terms, because channeling involves a third party, and obviously the divine, the God creator, didn't use a third party. It was all that is, the beginning. It's not just sound alone, because to get the full power and the full benefit and usage, we need to understand what it means. As with all languages, languages is used to communicate something to people, to give us an understanding of something. And so sound alone, although the sound has a vibration, it doesn't have the same power as using the actual words or the divine names. And we have to use it ourselves. Just listening to it doesn't have as much value as using it for yourself, because that's the only way you can truly integrate it into your consciousness and into your actual being. So it's not speaking in tongues, which it has become a little confused with. In the Bible, in the texts, in the Keys of Enoch, they all explain the difference between the speaking in tongues, which is a gift of the Holy Spirit, and the divine language of light. And that is because also the speaking in tongues is soul generated. In other words, it belongs more to this 3rd dimension. As I understand it, it's our own personal soul language. Each one of us has this access to our soul through speaking in tongues. And so it's a little bit of, as I see it, a potential expansion of our sixth sense, shall we say, because everybody can do it. Everyone has their soul language, the speaking in tongues. And so really, if you think of the God's language as the as above, and then the speaking in tongues as below, it's something we can use down here. So it has a different frequency, and it is for our own personal use, as I have found. I'll just give you a little demonstration, and you can just feel for yourself if there's any effect from it. Lemon shikama adifa takirme, shida malafa, ikatamana shikafadamana, lemana fasha, katakamana shikafa, elamana labashitu kanama, ira takafale manafanu, aya for the pashitaki, ataki, ataki. Now that is my language and has a resonance within me. Well, you probably didn't feel anything, which is quite correct, because you have your own. And you can learn to use and develop your own if you choose, just as in a lot of Pentecostal churches they are doing. So now let's experiment and experience a sample of the divine, the God language of light, shall we say. And you need to say to understand. So I'm going to use Adonai Ein Sof. And what that is saying is Adonai is linking with an aspect of God that is to do with the divine mind, the creative and inspirational part of the God force that had in mind, shall we say, the thought of creation before it even happened. And then the Ein Sof, I have explained before, but just to recap, simply says it's without limit, it's infinite, it's eternal, it's omnipresent, it's everything, all that it is. And that is an aspect of the Godhead. So by saying Adonai or Adonai Ein Sof, we are consciously then linking our mind, our lower mind, to our own higher mind of our higher self, which is our intermediary, our stepping stone as it were, which in turn then will link with the Adonai, the divine mind. So in other words, it's a very useful mantra to use if you're wanting to gain more understanding or knowledge or inspiration. So Adonai Ein Sof, Adonai Ein Sof, Adonai Ein Sof. Now you could just notice your vibrations. They may have changed a little bit just by hearing it, but now we're going to do it together, and I think you'll see the difference it makes by actually saying it together. But remember, it needs to be conscious. You need to know why you're saying it. It's not just a nursery rhyme, as it were, because without intention, without understanding, you might just as well be saying ba ba black sheep. So if you'd like to join me, we'll do Adonai Ein Sof, and we'll do it 12 times because this corresponds with the 12 areas of our brain, because this divine language truly does create new neural pathways that make it easier for us to connect with our higher self, which, as I say, in turn connects with the divine mind. So if you'd like to just join me, just focus on within and focus now on why you're doing it. This is clearing your mind, and so that you will be more able and receptive to receive higher understanding, knowledge, wisdom, inspiration, whatever it is that's most useful, and I'm sure each one of us in our own way can do with that. So let's begin. Adonai Ein Sof, 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 Adonai Ein Sof. I suggest you just keep your eyes closed or close them and just feel now your vibratory frequency within your being. I'm sure, like me, you can feel tingling, perhaps in your fingers or toes or hands or some part of your body, Maybe you can feel it in your third eye chakra. Some people feel their crown chakra becoming more active. It's personal to each one of us how we sense it. But just know that that has increased your inner vibrational frequency and therefore is helping to activate your inner body of light. And the good thing is that it increases in its power and its effect the more we use it. So I use mine every day, of different ones depending on my focus for the day or at that time. What this divine language also does, it helps us transcend challenging situations in life so that we can see the real reason behind whatever's happening, and also we can get inspiration as how best to handle them, and that's a wonderful gift. As I say, it's connecting our creating new neural pathways in the brain, which is opening up our mind to receive higher mind input. We get greater self-healing ability using this language because it's helping, as I say, to reactivate, if that's your intention, your original perfect God code in your DNA. And with the new sciences like epigenetics, we know that DNA we can change and alter and benefit from improvement through the environment that we give it. And that environment comes through our attitudes, our thoughts, our thinking, our activities, and of course anything like this which is of a higher divine frequency. So it also harmonizes your energies and vibrations. It, using this language, expands your consciousness beyond just the lower 3D mind, so that you can link, as I say, again, more clearly with your higher mind. And of course, therefore, it's accelerating your soul progress and your understanding. And another one I mentioned before, but it's one of my favorites, so I'll mention it again. It's actually activating some of our higher divine potential, in particular of creating the frequency that miracles can manifest and occur in different parts of your life. And I just love this miracle making aspect that is a part of us if we claim it. It is one of our highest self attributes. And if this divine language is new to you and you'd like to have some CDs, do go to Dr. Hurtak's Academy for Future Science online, www.keysofenoch.org, and under the music section you'll see listed all his beautiful CDs of the various mantras and the divine names, and with each one comes the meaning so that you can use them intentionally and gain the greatest benefit from them. And if you're new to this, the ones I would suggest, because there's a lot there to choose from, some of them have samples you can listen to, I would suggest perhaps starting with the Songs of Ascent or Radiance. Celestial Awakenings is another beautiful one. If you've got children or grandchildren and you want to encourage them to learn it and sing along, there's a delightful one called Songs of Glory, which is made up of a children's choir in Mexico singing these beautiful divine names. And his latest one is very powerful, Sacred Names and Sacred Codes. And at the beginning, Dr. Hurtak and his wife Desiree give a very clear description of this language of light. So I suggest if that appeals to you, do have a look at that. And I have a lot of information on my website, of course, so please do visit whenever you can. It changes with the various activities, www.ominternational.co.nz. So I would just like to now close with our usual language of light blessing, the Kadosh mantra. And I haven't explained too much about it, so now we're going to do it with intention and with more power. Its main power and usage is that it connects the spiritual rhythms of our higher self with the biorhythms of our physical being. So in other words, you're linking as above, so below as you do it with that idea. It is also another fortification process, creating an energy field that makes it very difficult for lower or negative energies or entities to be part of. It has, as I say, many other meanings, which if you read the Keys of Enoch, it will explain. There's a whole key about it. But just knowing that much will give it a real power. So let's just close with the Kadosh mantra, which simply means holy, holy, holy is the Creator, the Lord God of all. So in other words, you're linking consciously with the highest known frequency in creation of God through his, well, I don't like the word his, through God's language of light, because obviously God isn't a being as we know it. So through the divine or God's language of light. Kadosh, 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 Adonai, Savayot. Kadosh, 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 Adonai, Savayot. Kadosh, 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 Adonai, Savayot. So it is, and blessings be.